Starting off at number 10 now, we have the sock puppet. This one comes from Ireland, where many years ago a man owned all the land around a village and rented it out to the poor farmers there for a profit. He was very kind to his own family but brutal to the other villagers. He made a fortune from this cruelty. The villagers hatched a plan to overthrow him one day. One Christmas night he threw a lavish party for his friends while the villagers were starving in the cold. A villager arrived bearing a gift. He said it was a present for the rich man's daughter. The girl opened it to find a sock puppet that the villager had knitted. He asked for some food in return. The rich man gave him a single potato. The girl loved the sock puppet though. She named it Charlie. She took it to bed that night. When her father went to check on her, she was fast asleep. But he noticed that Charlie was still on her hand and its plastic eyes were staring right at him. The villagers were about to get their bloody revenge on the rich man thanks to a murderous sock puppet called Charlie. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Christmas tree decorations. This is a story from Scary for Kids about a girl called Juliet who was decorating a Christmas tree. Her mum was working late, and so when she finished with the tree, she sat down to watch some TV. It was then that she heard a scratching noise at the door. She looked through the peephole to see a man outside. He was a large, bearded guy in a red suit with fluffy white trim. He banged on the door loudly. Juliet asked, "Who's there?" The man said he was Santa Claus and that he wanted to come in because he was cold and tired and hungry. Juliet didn't believe him. She told him that her mother wasn't home and she wanted him to leave. His face began to go red and twist with anger. He knocked even harder and growled,
"It's Santa Claus, Juliet. Have you laid out some milk and cookies for me, Juliet? You know how much Santa loves his milk and cookies."
Honestly, it's a creepy story from start to finish, and it only gets worse for Juliet from there. All I'll say is make sure you don't read it right after you've eaten. Moving on to number 8 now, we have The Figure. This one comes from Arthur H, who shared his story on cagemom.com. He said, "My mother, to whom I was very close, passed away in 1964 when I was 17 years old. I left home that year and moved to Ontario from Nova Scotia. In 1969 I met a girl who I will call Karen, and we got married in March of 1970. In December of 1971 we were expecting our first child. We were living in a small 1.5 bedroom bungalow. There was a fireplace in the living room. My wife and I loved the fireplace and we had it lit every night. It was Christmas Eve 1971 and we had just finished putting the gifts under the tree and a nice fire gave off a beautiful glow. On the tree, one string of lights which was supposed to flash had stopped several days before. It was 5 minutes to midnight when the fireplace suddenly just about went out and a string of lights started to flash and the other lights stopped flashing. My wife and I were sitting on the floor and it had become very chilly in the room. I looked over to my lazy boy chair and a figure was sitting there. My mother with a big beautiful smile on her face. My wife, who had never met my mother, said she could see the same thing. This ghost never spoke but just kept looking at me and my wife and smiling. At 12 midnight the fire in the fireplace started up again and the lights on the tree stopped flashing and the others started flashing again. I looked over in the chair and the ghost was gone. No matter what I did to those Christmas lights, they never flashed again. Next up at number 7 now, we have The Boy Who Killed Santa Claus. This one was written by Mark Allen Gunnels. It's about a 7-year-old boy called Henry Childers. He asked his mum to stay up past 10 on Christmas Eve one year, but she warned him that if he didn't go to sleep, Santa wouldn't come that night. He had hoped that Santa would get things right this year. Last year, he asked for an Xbox, but he got a PlayStation instead. His mum told him not to worry, Santa was probably all out of Xboxes, but Henry had not forgotten. Henry had a rage inside of him. He had been plotting all year. He knew he was too little to fight Santa, but he also knew that Santa liked to have milk and cookies. He also knew that food and drink can always be poisoned. Finish the story to find out what happened to the boy who killed Santa Claus. It's a good one. Moving on to number 6 now, we have Bloody Axe. This story actually comes from an old horror comic, and the pictures you're seeing now are from just that. It's written from the perspective of an 8-year-old boy. He would lie very still under the old moth-eaten quilt his mother had made for him. He would be wide awake and listen out for sounds. On one Christmas Eve, he heard the front door closing and the clomp, clomp, clomp of his father's mud-caked boots, and then there was the sound of dripping on the stairs. Drip, 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 Then his father would pass by his doorway and the light would cast his shadow on the bedroom wall and the shadow of the bloody axe he always carried in his hands. At breakfast the next morning, he slowly asked his mother where his father had been last night. She looked at him with sad eyes but never said a word. By the end of this story though, we learn that there is a connection with the rumours of the nearby axe murderer and his father's return every night. Let's just say it doesn't have a pretty ending. Moving on to number 5 now, we have The Carol Singers. This is a story based on The Vanishing House by Bernard Capes. The storyteller said that when they were a boy, their grandfather and father were alcoholics who never worked. They could play instruments though. On one Christmas Eve, they took him Christmas caroling with them, door to door. It was a dark night, snow was falling and the wind cut through them like a knife. They came to a big mansion decorated with Christmas lights. The grandfather knocked on the front door and they began to play some old Christmas carols. When the door finally swung open, in the dim light they could see a young woman stood holding a tray of glasses in her hands. She picked up a glass and handed it to the grandfather, who excitedly took it. The boy looked up to a window above and saw a hideous face peering out of the shadows. He looked back at the woman in the doorway and her face had twisted hideously too. They would live to regret the day they ever came to that mansion and the grandfather taking that glass. Alright everyone, moving on to number 4 now, we have The Clown Puppet. There was once 3 sisters aged 15, 12 and 7. They told their parents what they wanted for their Christmas gift of choice. The oldest asked for a laptop, the middle for an iPad and the youngest for a small doll. On Christmas Day, the oldest and middle daughters got what they asked for. They were over the moon. The youngest daughter didn't receive a doll though. Instead, she got a clown puppet. She thought it was cute and so she kept it. 2 days later, the youngest daughter disappeared. The next Christmas, the oldest daughter asked for an iPad and the middle child asked for a clown puppet. Sure enough, 2 days later, she disappeared. The next Christmas, the last remaining daughter asked for a clown puppet in memory of her sisters. She disappeared as well. The heartbroken parents never recovered. They eventually became so poor they had to sell everything for money. One day they went into the attic to look for items to sell. That's when they saw, in the darkness at the very back, the clown puppet was sitting on a throne made from lollipop sticks, arranged all around it were the severed heads and limbs of the 3 missing girls. Next up at number 3 now, we have The Griefer. He told them the story of the grifter, the most awful thing in the world. He lives in a cave at the North Pole. The coldest, wettest place on earth is where the grifter makes his home. He sleeps in the wreck of a ship. He doesn't mind the cold and he doesn't mind the wet, but the thing he hates most of all is to hear someone say his name. He has very good ears and they get bigger every time his name is spoken anywhere on earth. Sometimes his ears get so big he can use them to fly. At this point, Steffa said she didn't like the story. It was scaring her. It's too late now, the mother said. We've already mentioned his name. The grifter is probably on his way to our house this very minute. Those words will come to haunt them before this story ends. Moving on to number 2 now guys, we have Belsnickel. If you're watching this from a Germanic speaking country, you may be familiar already with this story. In that part of the world, the Belsnickel is a fur-clad Christmas gift bringer. He has a long tongue and is typically very ragged and disheveled. His clothes are dirty and ripped, and he's known for beating misbehaved children with a stick. He's a mythical creature that serves as an almost anti-Santa-like creature. If it's Santa's job to deliver joy and presents, it's the Belsnickel's job to make sure they deserve it. And finally, number 1 now, we have Purple Fingernails. This one comes from the Scary for Kids website, and I'll read it exactly as I found it. There was once a little girl who had a large collection of dolls. One Christmas, she saw a doll in the window of a department store that she absolutely had to have. It had long, flowing blonde hair and a lovely blue dress. But the thing that impressed her the most about the doll was that it had lovely, bold, purple fingernails. When Christmas morning came, she was delighted to find the doll with the purple fingernails lying under the Christmas tree. She played with it all day, and when she went to sleep, she put it on the table at her bedside. That night, the little girl was awakened by strange noises. It was still dark outside. She looked over for her doll, but it was nowhere to be found. The girl, puzzled, got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The door to her parents' room was ajar, and she pushed it open softly and looked in. Her parents appeared to be sleeping soundly, and so she went back to bed. In the morning, she saw the doll with the purple fingernails was sitting on the table by her bed, exactly where she had left it. She assumed that she must have just been having a bad dream, but when she went into her parents' room that morning, she found them both lying dead in a pool of blood. There were 2 purple doll fingernails stabbed into their hearts. Coming at number 10 now, we have the Whipping Father. In Belgium and France, there is an old legend around a man called Père Foutard. The story goes back to the 12th century. This man spent his early years as an innkeeper, a kidnapper, and then a murderer. One day at the inn, 3 rich boys visited on their way to a religious boarding school. The man wanted their money, and so he kidnapped them and took them away to slit their throats. He then began to prepare them for some sort of human stew, but at the last moment, Saint Nicholas himself showed up and resurrected the 3 boys. That's right, Santa himself saved the day. Seeing this power, the man then repented and became Santa's partner. His job was to bad boys and girls on Santa's naughty list. That makes the naughty list about 1,000 times worse, I think. Alright, moving on to number 8 now, we have the Yule Lads. These figures come from Icelandic folklore. There are 13 Yule Lads. They're the sons of mountain trolls who have a bit of a taste for the flesh of naughty children. The 13 of them harass and pull devilish pranks on people, making their lives a misery. Each one of them has a different job. One of them will steal your food, another will wait for you under your bed, another slams doors, while another simply watches you through windows. How creepy is that? For me though, perhaps the scariest one is the candle stealer. He follows children around so that he can steal their candles, leaving them in the dark. Although in modern times I imagine he's figured out light switches. Okay, at the number 7 spot now we have Belsnickel. This story comes from southwestern Germany. Belsnickel is said to be a man who wears rugged furs and a mask. He has a long tongue and carries around a switch in his hand to beat naughty children with at Christmas. A switch is a piece of wood or some sticks that are usually used in beating punishments. He would have treats for the good children, but even then he would often them as they reach to grab the treats off the floor. I think I'd just pass on the treats altogether. Okay, at the number 5 spot now we have Hans Trapp. Hans is essentially the Christmas boogeyman in one part of France. He is said to be the anti-Santa, although he started out life as a normal man. He was rich, greedy, and all-round evil. He worshipped Satan and was then expelled from the Catholic Church because of it. Eventually, he was exiled to the forest and used to catch children by posing as a scarecrow. One day, he was about to eat a he had captured, but was struck by lightning and killed as a punishment from God. That didn't stop him though, and he is still said to visit young children at Christmas, dressed as a scarecrow to see how they've behaved. Alright, at the number 4 spot now, we have La Befana. La Befana is an old Italian Christmas witch. Her story comes from Italian folklore that some say dates right back to Roman times. There are many origin stories for her, but one of the stranger ones says she wasn't always a witch. She used to be just an ordinary woman with a child who she loved with all her heart. Tragically, her child died, and the grief sent Befana crazy. She heard the news that Jesus had been born though, and so she set out to look for him, thinking that he was actually her son. She found him and gave him gifts. In return, Jesus gave her the gift of being the mother to every child in Italy, and to give them gifts at Christmas. So, if you're ever in Italy on Christmas Eve and catch sight of a broom, say hi to the witch. Next up at number 3 now, we have Mari Lwyd. This tradition originates from South Wales in the UK and involves a zombie horse. Yes, Marie is a zombie horse. Marie would rise from the dead at Christmas and wander the streets with human zombies to remind the living of their existence. Marie wants to get into people's houses, and the only way to keep her out would be to engage her in a battle of wits through rhyming. That's right, to stop this skeletal zombie horse from entering your home at Christmas, you basically have to rap battle it. If that doesn't sound like a terrifying nightmare, I don't know what does. Alright, at the number 2 spot now we have Stragelli. Stragelli is the sort of demonic looking helper to Pachetta the witch, someone we talked about earlier in the video. You might wonder how Pachetta manages to slice open all those naughty kids. Well, Stragelli helps. He will go around and eat the offerings left out by people in the hope of Pachetta's blessing. If he comes across any naughty kids before Pachetta does, he will rob them of everything they own, throw them up into the air, and then tear them into pieces. That makes Pachetta's belly slitting almost seem normal, except not really. None of this seems normal. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Yule Cat. cat. If you guys remember the Yule lads from earlier on in the video, well, this is their cat that they bring along with them to terrorize people at Christmas. The Yule cat is big and fearsome, exactly what you'd expect when its owners are child-eating mountain trolls. Unlike many of the other ones on our list, you can't reason with the Yule cat. There is only one thing a child can do at Christmas to not be visited by the Yule cat. The cat is said to eat children who do not receive any clothes at Christmas. So guys, just be thankful next time you get some socks from a relative. They may have just saved your life from the Yule cat.
One of the most classic Christmas stories is the Charles Dickens novella A Christmas Carol. We follow the life of Ebenezer Scrooge, who is a mean and grumpy old man, but when he gets a visit from a few ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come, he learns some very valuable lessons that help him remember what is really important. One of the main hidden messages in the movie is really the fact that money doesn't buy happiness. Ebenezer was obviously a successful businessman and certainly had enough money to live a more than comfortable life, but he was still so unhappy and mean. He was even treating the people who helped him poorly and refused to help anyone else. Once he was able to take a step back and have some perspective, he was able to really open up and figure out what is important in life, and he certainly ended the movie on a much better note than when it started. In our number 9 spot, we have Elf. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. Oh, Elf. Such a sweet, silly movie that really puts us into the holiday spirit. We follow Buddy the Elf as he realizes he doesn't really fit in with the other elves and takes a trip to try and find his real father. He leaves the North Pole for New York City in search of his idea of family, but of course an elf in the Big Apple is cause for some chaos. The hidden message in this movie is do what you love. Buddy sure does like to wander off the beaten path of what is considered normal, and of course he is a little goofy, but he truly does hold a lot more happiness and cheer in his heart than a lot of the other people he meets in the movie. His honesty and how true he is to himself really makes us love him a little extra, and I think we could all afford to take a page out of his book when it comes to being our true, authentic selves. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Grinch. Whether it's the Dr. Seuss book or one of the movie versions, The Grinch tells the tale of a mean guy who hates Christmas and all of the Who's in Whoville who love to celebrate. We see mean old Mr. Grinch try his best to ruin Christmas for everyone else, but lovely Cindy Lou Who sees something more in him and helps him realize all that Christmas magic. There are quite a few lessons we can take from this story, but one of its hidden messages is how, when you're feeling hurt, that doesn't mean it's okay to hurt others. The Grinch really just felt left out and isolated. And who can blame him? Everyone bullied him in school for being green, even though he couldn't help it. We can't blame the Grinch for how he felt, but it definitely was not okay for him to treat others like that just because he had felt hurt in the past. Luckily, Cindy was able to show him the love and kindness that he was missing, and he was able to realize his mistakes. In our number 7 spot today, we have Frosty the Snowman. Frosty the Snowman is a classic Christmas tale about a sweet snowman with a jolly and happy soul. He comes around Christmas, but when he has to leave every year, he reminds the children not to be upset because he will be back. So what could possibly be hidden in this story? Well, apparently Frosty is Jesus. I guess Frosty the Snowman is a house for the soul of Jesus to come and spend time with the children during the holiday season. Frosty was all about love, whether it was the way that he loved the children or how the children loved him, and this is meant to mimic the way that God loves the world and had sent Jesus to help it. Apparently over the years, the lyrics to the song have been made slightly less religious as to be more inclusive, but I guess this was its original meaning. In our number 6 spot, we have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Rudolph is a story that we have all heard countless times. The reindeer with a bright red nose who was shunned from being able to pull Santa's sleigh because of his unique quality. Well, the message in this one really is not to judge people who are different than you, because everyone really does have something to offer. Santa was very quick to judge when he first saw Rudolph, and even the other reindeers were making fun of him. Well, joke's on them, because Rudolph really turned out to be the hero. Not only did he bravely withstand all of the bullying that the others put him through, but he also uses his special talent to be able to guide Santa's sleigh throughout the dark night sky. If only people had given Rudolph a chance earlier, they would have realized his potential much sooner. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Nutcracker and the Mouse King. The Nutcracker is another truly classic holiday tale. Whether it's the story, the ballet, the Barbie movie, or any other version out there, it is a story for the whole family that is a favorite during this time of year. It tells the story of young Clara who receives a nutcracker at Christmas time. Soon she is transported into the Nutcracker's world where they have to battle the Mouse King and meet a bunch of friends along the way. While this story has many different versions, a hidden message in it is about imagination. The original author of the Nutcracker, Ernest Theodor Amadeus Hoffmann, wanted to tell a story that made us all remember our inner child and bring us back in touch with it. As we get older, we certainly begin to feel a lot more societal pressure that children seem to be immune to. Clara is transported to this wonderful world with the Nutcracker, but it is all due to her vivid and beautiful imagination. This story certainly acts as our reminder to loosen up a bit and remember what is possible if you really let yourself believe. In our number 4 spot today, we have The Fir Tree. The Hans Christian Andersen classic The Fir Tree is a tale of a small tree in the forest who is extremely envious of all of the other bigger trees. The little fir tree sees the others getting chopped down and hears tales of them being turned into things like ship masts and begins to feel embarrassed because he isn't big like the other trees. The message in this story is a lesson on being present. The little fir tree is so caught up in where everyone else is and what all the other trees are doing that he forgets to focus on himself and just be content with his own growth. At the end of the tale, he realizes that maybe being grown up and leaving the forest like the other trees isn't the glamorous life that he thought it would be. It really is a case of believing that the grass is greener on the other side, but this tale serves as our reminder that the journey is just as important, if not more important, than the destination. In our number 3 spot today, we have another Hans Christian Andersen tale, The Steadfast Tin Soldier. This story tells the tale of a brave soldier who was made from a tin spoon. Because he was the last tin soldier to be made, there wasn't enough tin left, so he only had one leg to stand on. Soon he sees a pretty ballerina who is also standing on one leg and he falls in love. The message in this tale truly is about faithfulness and commitment. The soldier really became committed to joining the ballerina. Through all of the trials and tribulations that he goes through in the story, he never gives up on his goal. Although the ending isn't exactly happy or picture perfect, the two still end up being together and the soldier turns into a tin heart instead. Although he faced death, the soldier still remained true and brave. In our number 2 spot, we have The Gifts of Maggie. This story by O. Henry is a beautiful story with a message that still rings true today. The story follows a young husband and wife and their tale of setting aside what little money they have in order to be able to afford Christmas gifts for each other. This story isn't meant to be about gifts or any material object, but more of a lesson on what people are willing to do for those that they love. This is true for any time of year, but especially around the holidays, we see a lot of people sacrificing things for their loved ones in order to make the holidays special and memorable. It certainly isn't always with gifts or the things that we can see, but that doesn't make it not important. At the end of the story, where we see how priceless their love truly is and how that is the most important thing, and I think that is something that we can all appreciate. In our number 1 spot today, we have What Christmas Is As We Grow Older by Charles Dickens. This one is an interesting read and is quite different than a lot of his classic Christmas stories. It certainly is more of an essay or a narrative than a story, but I think the lesson it provides us made it earn its spot on this list. Whether you're young or not, we're all getting older, and the older we get, the easier it is to forget what Christmas time and the holidays are all about. This story gently reminds us that Christmas is a time to be grateful, it's a time to remember, and a time to reflect. We all have memories of Christmas time, and whether positive or negative, it is really important that we take the time to reflect on these journeys that we have been through. Christmas is a time that can be used to let go of things that no longer serve us and remember all of the wonderful things we each have in our lives.